Basketball season is here. Badger fans, why last year was a success. We're going to talk about it and what to look forward to this year and some national thoughts on Greg Gard and this program and where they fit in the Big Ten. All that on Locked On Badgers basketball. Here we go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fam? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Appreciate all the everydayers that are here every day watching us and everybody in the community. Thank you guys so much. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. If your first $5 bet hits, visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're going to talk basketball, players that need to step up, national look at kind of Greg Gard in this program. But first, we're going to bring on our new guest, Cole Amundsen, contributing editor over at bustingbrackets.com and a Wisconsin graduate, knows hoops, talks about it at a national level. Let's get it. Dude, we're a day out. And I want to start here because I go back and forth with Badger fans on this one all the time. Last year, Greg Gard's team got a 5 seed, beat Purdue, beat Marquette, but then got bounced in pretty ugly fashion to JMU, who was a 12. Do you consider that a successful year?
Yeah, looking at it, I do consider it a successful season. You know, I like to think about this. You look at the overall body of work that Wisconsin had. You look at their resume, as you see, they got a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. On the seed line, they were 19th. There's 300 plus teams that would have taken that spot. And you look at the overall body of work. Yes, I do view it as a successful season. You can think about it in two ways. You could think about it from November all the way to January. And you're like, this team was on top of the world. I remember it was February, the start of February, when Wisconsin was, I believe they're 16-4. They were 6th in the nation. And we were doing some bracketology in Wisconsin if they were playing Nebraska and Purdue up next. And they were on the discussion line. I remember we were seriously considering them as a 1 seed. If they would have taken care of business those 2 games, they would have been on the 1 seed line. That's just how good the start of the season was. But then, of course, we know how the Nebraska game went 2 years in a row. I never want to see Pinnacle Bank Arena again, but that's okay. But again, the wheels fell off the bus a bit in February. That is for sure. No denying that. But I do think the Badgers showed a really strong showing in the Big Ten tournament. The win over Purdue. I mean, Purdue was the best team in the Big Ten, one of the best teams in the country. If it wasn't for UConn, again, runner-up, right? So Purdue was one of the best teams in the country. Great win over them there. And, of course, there's the James Madison loss. And the way it is a little bit of a gripe there, in my opinion, with that, because a lot of times in the NCAA tournament, it's kind of a crapshoot. It's a single elimination tournament. A lot of things can happen. You play bad for 5 minutes, you might go home, right? But I think the problem is with that game specifically is you're going to get beat sometimes, right, in the NCAA tournament, but it's a matter of how you get beaten. And I think that was a bit concerning too, because you're right, James Madison jumped on Wisconsin from the gun. I mean, right away we saw, Wisconsin was playing catch-up for the whole 40 minutes. They didn't lead a single minute of that game. So, yeah, that was concerning. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, I will deem that as a successful season for Wisconsin.
From a national, and I agree with you, by the way. I've said I think there's a lot of teams that would kill to be a 5 seed to get bounced in round 1. And it doesn't mean it's okay to get bounced in round 1, but both these be true.
Absolutely.
From a national standpoint, because you cover this, you cover Wisconsin, but you also cover college hoops in general. What is kind of the national perception, do you think, of Greg Gard and the Badgers program? How does it fit into the Big Ten? What are your discussions there like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think nationally, from the national perspective with Wisconsin I think a lot of the hot takes on Greg Gard have come from the lack of NCAA tournament success. And I think to a certain extent that is justified. I mean, Greg Gard did make the Sweet 16 his first 2 years, and he did that. People say, with Bo Ryan's guys. I understand that for sure. And I think the national landscape is kind of, there's those grumblings of the NCAA tournament success where Wisconsin is going to be competitive. Wisconsin is going to be good. But were we too spoiled with what happened with Bo Ryan, right? But the thing is, we're never going to get Bo Ryan again. Bo Ryan was one of a kind. And I think Brad Underwood over at Illinois made a really good point. And I think this kind of speaks true to what's going on with Wisconsin is you just got to keep chopping wood. When Brad Underwood was asked about the lack of NCAA tournament success, He just said, you got to keep chopping wood. And I think that's the case with Wisconsin from the national perspective is they're fielding competitive teams year in, year out. They're going to have, it feels like, a winning season every year. It feels like that's the expectations, no doubt about it. That should be. And you just got to keep chopping wood. This year, again, I know that there are some alleviating concerns here, and I know we'll get to that in a few. But national perspective here, I think, kind of goes towards those grumblings on Greg Gard and the lack of tournament success.
Let me ask you this very big picture thoughts here. Are you more confident now starting this year than you were at the beginning of last year? Like, where is just your optimism for this Badgers team this year right now, one day out before the season starts?
I'm not as optimistic as last year. I can tell you that. I think the biggest hurt from them is there is that thing. Wisconsin got gutted by the portal, but they actually return a decent percentage of their minutes. I believe that number is a bit over 50%. And if you compare that to the rest of the Big Ten, that's actually a decent number. And Gard alluded to that in their press conference against UW River Falls. So that is a decent number. They got some solid returners. But again, you look at who they lost, and I think the biggest loss for them and why I'm not as optimistic is Chucky Hepburn. You have a 3-year starting point guard, and I'm a big sucker in the backcourt. Love it. And I'm a big sucker for veteran guard play. And that is what you would have had with Chucky Hepburn this year. You would have had your 4th-year starting point guard, and he's not there. And now the point guard minutes have to be dispersed by committee. And I do think that's kind of where my concern with this group kind of lies. So, no, I'm not as confident with this group. I still think that they could be competitive. They're going to be a tough out, but I think that ceiling for Wisconsin this year is a bit lower. Is definitely lower compared to last year's ceiling.
Yeah, so I'm there with you. I think the biggest loss, I think AJ Storr makes a lot of headlines going to Kansas. And Tyler Wall, obviously, you lose some toughness, rebounding, defensive versatility with Tyler Wall, but I think you need like a guy who can get you some looks, who can handle defensive pressure, right? And we're going to get into the roster composition in a second, but this actually feels like a team that Chucky Hepburn would be great on, with more shooting around. He wouldn't have as much scoring responsibility, I think, with some of the other pieces. Yeah, it's a major bummer. And they didn't fill that hole, right? Yeah. I think it's the biggest concern to me going forward.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely. And, it does suck to see him leave because, there's a lot of things that Chucky did right. It might not have showed on the box score and what you saw, but I mean, you just look at his on-ball defense. You just look at how he pestered people on the backcourt. I mean, it is a very tough loss. And in a way, it's almost like an irreplaceable loss, and they did not address it very well in the portal. I can agree.
Let me ask you this: what should the expectations be this year? Then, so you and I agree, like a 5 seeds is a successful season. Period. Stop. Should they be is the expectation at Wisconsin you need to make the tournament every year? Is that fair? When you look around college basketball and see a lot of really good basketball schools that don't do that, and we both know if he doesn't this year, people are going to come out with pitchforks. Is that a fair expectation for a program like Wisconsin that every year you need to make the tournament?
Yeah, I do think so. At least in the conversation for the NCAA tournament, I do agree. I mean, this is Wisconsin. I mean, I grew up watching Bo Ryan basketball. I know what it was like beforehand. I wasn't alive back then, or I don't remember much, but I do know that at this point, yes, Wisconsin is a program that I believe should be in the NCAA tournament, or at least in the conversation every single year for an NCAA tournament bid. Absolutely. And I think with this year's expectations, it's going to be tough. I do think it will be. I think Wisconsin kind of fits. This season really reminds me a lot of the 2022-2023 season, when you first kind of entered with expectations where, you knew they had some pieces, you knew that they could scrape together a few wins, but there's a lot. I mean, even Gard alluded to this. There's going to be learning to do, especially defensively here with this group.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. I do think the expectation needs to be set at you get to the tournament. Yep. This is Wisconsin. There's been 2 decades of success here. The infrastructure's here. I 100% agree. It just speaks to how consistent this program is, where that's considered the floor. Like, if you don't do that, it's unsuccessful. And I think that's where the floor needs to be. But it's a successful program that leads to expectations. All right, we're going to take one quick break for our friends of the show. We're going to come back. I'm going to ask Cole, during this offseason, what is the best move he thinks the Badgers made? What is the new piece he likes the most or is most excited about? That's going to be coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy is perfect for the fan that needs just a little bit more to push through. Like, listen, being a fan is tough, man. Setting up tailgates, cooking everything just right. I mean, y'all know me. I can't cook, but like other people do, and that looks like a lot of work. That's why 5 Hour Energy is here for you. They created the new Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called FanDuel. The energy shot made for superfans just like us, the fans who come into the parking lot first and they're the last to leave. They see you. 5 Hour Energy sees you, right? And that's what they're here to do, help you fuel through your sports weekend, especially with basketball coming up. There's even more sports that are going to be going on. You're going to need this. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter which team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help you keep fueled throughout the season. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. All right, let's bounce back into this conversation with Cole. Definitely appreciate you jumping on, man. Where can people find let's start here. Where can people find your work and what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Find it on Twitter, @PlayForMarch. I'm a contributing editor over at Busting Brackets. I got that linked under my bio there as well, too. Check out the work that I write, do a lot of tweeting, and guess what? Watching a lot of games. Can't wait. Season's right around the corner. It's almost here. Very excited.
Yep, and we talked before the show, Cole. There will be no Iowa football talk in this show. It is basketball time. Go. Yep. All right, I wanted to talk to you. So we talked about some of the losses, right? We talked about Wall. We talked about Storr. Obviously, Chucky Hepburn. I think that's a huge hole. What is the offseason move that you like the most for the Badgers?
Yeah, the one that's right off the bat that I really like the most is John Tonje. I think I think he's excellent. What I really like about him the most is the veteran stability that you get from him and the way that he's built. He's kind of like this combo type guard, but he will fill more than likely at that small forward role, which I really do like with John Tonje. And you look at his stats. I know what we saw at Missouri. He was injured. I'm not even going to think about that. You look at what he did at Colorado State. From freshman to sophomore to junior to senior year, he consistently improved. And he was under a great coach, Nico Medved, who does a great job with that program. And you really got to see what he did well. And the fact that he's a really good 3-level scorer. But what we saw in the River Falls game that I thought that a little bit surprised me was he was not afraid to shoot. He was not afraid to shoot. And, he will definitely be one of those perimeter threats that we'll have. Wisconsin's going to be a perimeter shooting, 3-point shooting team. We saw that a lot at the UW River Falls game. I believe they shot 32 threes. I believe it had to be over 50% for the amount of threes that they shot that game for all their field goal attempts. So what you're going to see in Tonje is sort of that veteran stability that I think is much needed with this group that's trying to mesh all these pieces together. But you get that veteran, you fill him in, you slot him into the starting role, and I think that you have a really good making there to have him have a successful season.
Yeah, I love that you went there because for me, it's Tonje as well. And Tonje to me feels like a guy who, if you're expecting him to come in, and I've told other people watch the show this, like if you're thinking he's going to come in and be a number 2 guy, you're going to be disappointed. But what he's going to be is a super valuable, versatile player that can defensively switch on a couple guys, who's going to hit shots. Defenses are going to have to guard him. And something you brought up there I thought was a really good point. Shooting is super important, but shooting on volume is vital. You can have a guy who shoots 35%, but if he only takes 2 a game, it doesn't really matter. He's going to shoot the ball. He's willing to do it. And I think the percentages over his career tell you he's going to make a lot of them. I think it's a crazy valuable piece to the offense. And I think it opens things up for everybody else. I think he has a secondary impact of pulling gravity away from guys like Crowl, away from guys who want to drive into the rim. I think it's going to be a super underrated pickup.
Yeah, absolutely. Very excited to see what he can bring. I think he's going to have a big season. I really do. And I think he's going to play a big role. Absolutely.
Let's talk about that point guard spot now. Look, obviously we talked about the loss of Hepburn. I talked on a previous show that I think the best lineup this team probably has is one that has Blackwell and Max at the 1 and 2, Tonje at the 3, Crowl or Amos or Winter at the 4, and then Crowl at the 5. So you don't have a traditional point guard there. Some of that's because I don't think there's one on the roster, and some of it is because I just think that's your 5 best players. Good and bad with that lineup. Where are you at? Why do you like that potential lineup, and what worries you there?
I like it because you alluded to that. It is their best 5, and I think there is some point where you can kind of overcomplicate things. Oh, you don't have that true point guard. Oh, yada, yada. Sometimes you just got to roll your best 5 out there, and so that is why I do like that. But again, there is that caveat where you're not running a true point guard. It is point guard by committee. that could maybe overcomplicate things a bit when you're trying to run some schemes, you're trying to run some sets and whatnot, and you have different sets for different players. This guy's bringing it up for this one, this guy's bringing it up for the next one, and then things can get a little murky. Roles may not be as clearly defined, but that only happens through time. When you're playing this point guard by committee, you kind of have some influx in the backcourt. You kind of figure it out through time, and I think that's a big key piece with this year's group is time. I think this team will need time to gel. I think both offensively and defensively. I mean, last year, Wisconsin was terrible from defending the perimeter. I believe opponents shot 37% from three against Wisconsin. That was a sub 300 mark in college basketball. That's got to change. And I think with this year's group, is there's still a work in progress defensively. I think that, especially in the backcourt, again, that's very important too, is getting roles defined both offensively and then as well as defensively.
That's a good point. Defensively, this team was a bit of a train wreck last year.
Yeah.
I thought role defense was bad, rim protection was bad, perimeter defense, as you hit on, was really bad. And listen, against UW River Falls, I saw some of those same bugaboos. There was a couple pick and roll instances where it looks like our communication wasn't there. UW River Falls shot 34-ish% from three. I'm going off the top of my head, but that's not super encouraging considering the level of competition there. Yeah, I think that's a very valid concern, and I'm not sure they're better there, quite frankly. I don't know if the pieces you brought in make you better. I do think losing, for better and worse, AJ Storr brought a lot to this team, but offensively he was not a good defender. So I think there was some addition by substitution there. Let me ping you on this one. I think there's a scenario where, going back to that starting five, where Crowl is kind of the primary initiator once you get it into the half court. Dump the ball into Crowl, surround him with shooters, and see what the defense does, quite frankly, kind of a space around him. Do you like that, or does that cause some concerns for you?
I do like that because I do think one very underrated aspect of Steven Crowl's game is his passing. I think that he is a great passer, and if he does draw a double team, he can find that open man, and which is something that I do like about Crowl. And another fact is he's a stretch five, and I think that also opens up the floor there as well. There are some times where teams will, he's going to get an open three. He may not be the most consistent, but, he's going to shoot it. If he's wide open, there will be a time where he will shoot that. And I think having Crowl at times, he will be that front court anchor, but he can also stretch the floor if they happen to do a pick and pop, whatever that may be. But having that sort of versatility with Stephen Crowl is important.
What's your take? Where are you at in Stephen Crowl? Because I've argued that Badger fans don't see the full value there at times because they keep wanting him to be like Tyson Chandler, who can shoot. Like, they keep wanting to see dunks, and that's what I get it. That's what fans want to see from big men. Be a little more aggressive, dunk the ball, swat some shots. He's just not that guy. Yeah. But I think because you're looking for that, and listen, I'll be fair. Badger fans are correct. There are moments he disappears in more physical contests.
Yep.
Like that's a real thing. However, I think so much focus goes on that people kind of ignore the fact that a lot of teams, they choose to double Stephen Crowl because they don't think their post guy can handle him. There's a lot Stephen Crowl brings to the table. I think he's underrated. We didn't talk about this before the show. I'm super curious. Where are you at on Stephen Crowl?
Yeah, I think as of now, he's sort of what you see in Stephen Crowl is kind of what you're going to get. It's sort of like with Tyler Wall, after the past couple of years, you see what you're going to get with him. You just kind of know what you're going to get. But I think what's really important with Stephen Crowl is, as you alluded to, was the aggressiveness. And I know Gard was harping on him a bit last year too, with just being aggressive. Because you're right, there were times where he just kind of disappeared, right? Like, where did he go? Right. And I think, if he can hone in on that aggressiveness, and if he can just kind of be that point of attack initiator, if he is down in the post, that is something that's very important. And if he can, as a rim protector too, as well, if he can, just be a bit more of a physical force down low, I think are we going to get that a lot this year? Probably not. But I do think, though, that he will have a bigger role this year in terms of volume. And I think that might be something that we can look at. But I am a Stephen Crowl guy. I think he's very important. And I think, obviously, he'll be this team's leading scorer this year.
Give me your take on this one. Xavier Amos was brought in, and he was brought in nominally to be the starting four. He just was. And Winter has taken a jump this offseason. It looks like Winter's going to be that guy. Does that make you feel better because you think Winter took a jump, or maybe a little worse because maybe Amos isn't what they hoped he would be?
To me, it's worse. I remember when Amos committed, and I wrote about this too as well, where this is like the natural shoo-in. This is going to be the starting power forward. This is the natural slot at the 4. I was excited for it. Amos is a good stretch 4 too as well. I thought this could open up the floor. Early returns here, looks like, Gard's going with Winter, and it does make me a bit concerned because I did have my concerns a bit with the portal class, considering with Amos and Hunter. The concerns were, obviously, both were injury prone, and again, it is a jump. Cameron Hunter went from the A-Sun over to the Big Ten after missing an entire year. That's a big jump. And then Amos as well. He faced injuries both at NIU, but back-to-back years. That's a big jump to the Big Ten. But based on what I saw initially, from film and whatnot, was very excited. I am a bit concerned now that the early returns it looks like he's going to have to fight for that 7-8 spot on the roster, which is not initially what I expected.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I thought his game profile next to Crowl a little better than Winters does. He's a little bouncy, give you a little more rim protection, a really good shooter. He'd space better. Listen, Winter gives you some more physicality. I like Winter on the boards more, and maybe it works. I just think that front court might be they might have a tough time against more athletic forwards in the Big Ten. That's kind of where I was hoping Amos would come in. But Amos statistically wasn't a great defender if you look at the advanced numbers last year. So maybe that was premature hope on my part anyway. All right, we need to take one more quick break. We're going to come back. I want to talk to Cole about which player is he most excited to see, who needs to take the biggest jump for the Badgers to make the tournament, and get some official predictions. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. One quick second so we can hear from our friends of the show over at FanDuel. I talk about FanDuel a lot, right? Because that's a long-term relationship with this partner, this platform, FanDuel. They are incredible, fast, easy to use. Right now, $5 bet gets you $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Over at FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Great time, right? College basketball's here. Let's go. College football's still rolling. NFL, NBA. This is an amazing time if you want to spice up your sports weekend. Like I said, always do responsibly. But if you hit a couple parlays, man, a couple parlays can turn into a Jonathan Taylor signed jersey. Frame it up behind you. I'm building my office. I can use some swag in my background. You can do all that over at FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network over at FanDuel.com. All right, let's jump back into here with Cole. And I want to ask you this, man. Which player are you most excited to see this year? Because I always feel like coming out of every offseason, the new players, it's almost like presents under a Christmas tree. Like for a lot of fans who don't get to go to practice, who maybe don't get to see scrimmages, who are you most excited to see this year? And that could be a player that took a jump from last year to this year, a freshman, a transfer, whoever it is.
For me, I got 2, but I'm going to pick the most excited one. And for me, it's going to be John Blackwell. That's the one I'm the most excited to see. We saw he's got all the makings for a breakout candidate. I mean, what we saw, he had a really good freshman year. I think he could really take that jump. He's going to have the keys here to have a big role. I'm really excited to see him take that jump. I think he's going to have a great season. There's going to be a high demand for Blackwell. Absolutely. Him and Klesman are going to have to carry a big load in the backcourt. So I think it's going to be important and imperative for John Blackwell to have a big year this year.
What about his game do you love? Because I think he's a unique player. Like he's a more of a, it feels like a bit of a throwback, right? It's a little more silky smooth at times. He can score from a lot of places. He's not an elite athlete, but he's pretty good. What about his game do you really love?
What I really like about him is that aggressiveness, that kind of motor. I think he brings really good aggressiveness and motor. And what I really liked last year as a freshman, at times he seemed undaunted, and I think that was something that really looked. I remember he played well at Indiana on the road, and he was undaunted. And what I really liked about that as a freshman, it's rare to see that. And obviously, freshmen go through some growing pains. There's some inconsistent minutes, whatever it may be. But what I really liked about Blackwell is that sort of motor that he brings. And I think that's something that this team will need to rely on, especially in the backcourt.
Yeah, I love that answer. I love the aggressiveness, the not being afraid. Because if you look back at his per 40 numbers last year, Blackwell led the team in free throw attempts per 40, which as a freshman is incredible. That just shows you his ability. It shows you 2 things, in my opinion. Like I think that's a really important marker for a team, because you have to have somebody to get to the line, because that creates rim pressure, that creates defenses collapsing, and that gets other teams in foul trouble. It sets so many things up. But that shows you that he's fearless, was exactly what you said. But B, it also shows you he's got an uncanny ability to get to the rim and draw fouls, and that's a skill set. Not a lot of people have that. I love that Blackwell one. Give me the other one. You said you had 2.
Kamari McGee is another one. I'm really excited to see what he could do too. As Gard was talking in preseason, talking about how he was their most consistent player in practice. Now, that just gets me excited. I want to see what he can do now. And it looks like that he'll probably be that 6-man, 7-man, probably 6. It depends. And I think that could be a really good role that he can thrive under. I really do think so. And what I really like about Kamari McGee is he's just very good facilitator, really good defender, but he's not always looking to do the flashy play. He's going to give up a good shot for a great shot, right? That's something that he's willing to do. To sort of have that unselfishness facilitator role is going to be important when he comes off the bench.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let me ask you one of my fears here, and you tell me if you think this fear is legit or if I'm worrying myself for no reason. I talked previously, I like that 5-man lineup. I think that's the best lineup you have. And listen, they're going to mix and match, and lineups are going to change, rotations are going to change. But I like Blackwell and Klesman. I worry that if you put too much playmaking on Blackwell's plate, you lose some of the scoring and some of the the two-guard ability that he has.
Yeah, I'd say that's a reasonable concern. I would agree with you there. I think, you never want to put too much load on a player. I think that could actually, there is sort of a place where that turns into diminishing returns. You put too much load, too much sort of pressure on them to facilitate, to play that role. Absolutely. I think that is a reasonable concern. And again, my way to alleviate that is let's hope the time can figure that out. That's my big thing with this year's group is let's just hope time can figure it out. And I think this year's non-conference schedule, it's not as aggressive as it was with last year's schedule. And I think that's partially by design. You look at the teams that they're facing, and it's not going to be as aggressive. It'll still be decently ranked, obviously, but they're never going to have a horrific non-conference schedule. But I think that time factor is going to go into that with that schedule.
Give me one guy who, if this Badgers team is going to reach its ceiling, whatever it is, and we haven't even really talked about what that ceiling is, give me one guy that has to maybe overplay preseason expectations, a guy who has to outplay what people are hoping he's going to be.
Yeah, that's got to be Max Klesmit. I really do think so. He's, what do you average? He averaged almost 10 a game. I think it's like 9.9 a game, 10 a game. I think he's got to take that increase in scoring. I think he's got to, at times he was that fearless shooter, and I think he's got to continue to do that. And yeah, if Wisconsin's going to have to overachieve these expectations, it's going to have to go through Klesmit. You get that fifth-year guy. You get a guy that's been there for 2 years. To take that leap, it's got to be Klesmit.
Yeah, I think that's a good one right there. I think maybe Winter's another guy, if he's going to be the starting four, has to play some expectations. The last couple of years, I've talked about how I felt like this team wasn't deep enough. We had a certain amount of bodies, but it just felt like we didn't have enough good bodies in a way. And I'm not trying to disparage anybody. To me, this team feels different. I think maybe the top end of the team is not quite as good, but I feel you look at that starting five, right? And then you still have Kamari McGee, Freitag, Amos, Gilmore. That's 9 right there off the bench. You have Ilver, that's 10. Janicki's really impressed. Now, I don't think he's going to have a role, but he look pretty good. How deep is this? How deep is this rotation? How many guys get consistent minutes? Do they go 9 deep?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this just a couple of days. Just how many guys do you think he's going to play? Realistically, yes, he can play. He can go 9 deep. Will he end up doing that? I don't think so. For example, Jay Wright at Villanova won with 6 guys, basically, right? And not saying this team's going to go 6 deep, but again, with this group specifically, yeah, he can go 9 deep. I think the guard will tighten these rotations. I think realistically they'll probably only go 7, 8. It's going to be very interesting to see kind of how this rotation shakes out. But the beautiful thing is there are options to get that going, to get that. You're right. It's a little bit more dispersed this year. The top half isn't as good, but the team is a bit more dispersed in terms of talent wise. And there are a lot of options, which makes, the depth chart here come the start of the season sort of a mystery right now, which is very intriguing.
Yeah, I love it. I think, and some of it's just you have the more ability to mix and match, right? Yep. So you may have 9, 10 guys you don't mind putting in there. And one game you're playing a bigger front court and you're going to lean more heavily on a Gilmore, Winter, Amos, and the next game might be a little quicker, so you're going to lean more heavily on a Freitag, Kamari McGee lineup. I am curious though, if you're thinking this is probably 8-ish, 7, 8, which is historically accurate. That's usually what Gard wants to do. That's what a lot of coaches want to do. Who is that one guy you think maybe falls out of that rotation? Because again, if you think of that starting 5 that started, and then Kamari McGee is absolutely going to play. Yep. That's 6. Amos is going to play. That's 7. And then you still have Freitag, who I know they want to play to get reps. You still have Carter Gilmore, who Greg Gard absolutely loves and gives the defensive ability. Yeah. That right there is 9. Like,
Yeah.
who of those guys aren't going to play, do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I think, I like Gilmore. I think you're going to have to find a way to squeeze him in some minutes, but I think the one that falls out is Hunter. I do think Cam Hunter is the one that just falls out of the rotation. And, it is, again, this is all premature. I guess we don't know until the season starts. But, yeah, I don't see really right now a role for him right now to crack into that 7-8 right now. I think he's a little bit on that outside looking in.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. He needs to be able to shoot, and if he's able to shoot, I think you'll find a way into the rotation. But he struggled a little bit that 2 years ago prior to injury. All right, let's finish up here, man, because I've already kept you for 30 minutes, and this has been 30 minutes easy talking hoops, man. It's actually been a great palate cleanser after that Iowa game.
Oh, yeah.
It's been phenomenal. What's your prediction this year? So tournament team, yes or no? I don't know if you've done one yet. If you've done one on your
I have actually, and I have, and my answer is no. That is right now, my answer is no. I don't want to say that. There is the bias of Wisconsin right here, but right now, my answer is no. I do think that the expectation, though, with this group is to be in that conversation for an NCAA tournament bid. As we talked to already before, was this group. By no means does this group should never fall out of that picture. I expect this team to be in that NCAA tournament picture throughout the year, but I do not think they end up making it.
So outside of point guard, which we've hit on, and we'll finish up here, is there another big concern you look at this team and say, yeah, point guard maybe, and this other reason is why this team didn't get to the tournament?
Defense. That was another one of my concerns. It's a work in progress, and I never like to say that at the start of the season. That's not an encouraging sign. It's better. You don't want to start the season with already these concerns off the plate about your defense. You kind of want to be locked and running right away. But again, it's different. This is a transient nature in college athletics where a lot of teams don't know a lot of things about their players, right? That is very true, but defense is such a pillar to success. Defense is instrumental, especially, getting to the tournament and winning games in the tournament specifically. So that's another concern for mine. And then obviously on the perimeter is a concern from rim protecting, another one of my concerns there as well.
All valid. I concur with all. He is Cole Amundsen. Go check him out. Busting Brackets. We got his Twitter down there as well. Play for March. Go give him a follow. Check out the work he's doing. Man, that was awesome. Thank you for jumping on, man. And sometime during after a game, let's get back together and let's break down some more hoops.
Absolutely.
Everybody listening, thank you guys so much. Go check out Locked On Big Ten after this. Go check out all the biggest news in the conference over on that channel. Appreciate everybody for tuning in on Wisconsin. Bunch of great content coming up this week. We'll talk later.